Are you ready to take your first steps towards financial freedom by investing in property? Maybe you've started your portfolio but need some help continuing to grow. Lachlan Vidler and the team at Atlas Property Group are here to help. As experts in property investment, Lachlan and his team are ready to help you take advantage of some of the best investing conditions in almost 20 years. By completing the research, sourcing and negotiations, Lachlan goes the extra mile to find you a high-performing investment and set you on your path to financial freedom. Book in your free discovery call today at atlaspropertygroup.com.au.
This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
G'day, how you going? It's Phil Tarrant here. I'm the host of the Smart Property Investment Show. Hope you're well. Don't know where you are right now listening to this, but no doubt on holidays. It's all beginning here at Momentum Media. We're into the last week of the year. And for those that you don't know about the company behind Smart Property Investment, Momentum Media, it sort of operates across a whole bunch of different markets in Australia, including property and property investment, but it also sort of operates in law and accounting and defence and space, as in rockets and satellites and all that sort of stuff, the wealth sector, etc. So also it's got a big events business. So every single day, pretty much, we've got a big event running here. So we're into the home stretch. Today is our last set of events. And I'm sure our team is due a long rest after that. But quite a lot of things happening in smart property investment over 2022, which we'll be sharing with you. Some pretty cool stuff. No doubt will be a huge asset to you as you embark on or continue through or down your property investment journey. This is what we like to do, specifically investor stories, getting the real world insights from property investors about how they're going about building wealth through property. I'm very fortunate. I get to speak to a whole bunch of different people around it. As a real privileged position, having now probably spoken with well over 1,000, if not thousands of investors, trying to work out sort of the commonality between them all. And I think a passion for property is definitely one of them, but also a commitment to change, a commitment to ensuring that they're in control of their financial future. And if that sounds like you and you want to get stuck into this as a wealth creation journey, just go and tune in. There's thousands of now episodes you can listen to on the Smart Property Investment Show, where we speak to investors from all walks of life. But if you are just kicking off investing and you've just found this podcast, one thing that we have got up on Smart Property Investment right now, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, that you may be interested in for all those first time and new property investors. We've got our first ever secret sauce buyer's guide to getting started on your property investing journey. It's powered by our friends over at Bluestone Home Loans. You've probably heard about them beforehand. We've had them on the show having a chat with us before, but we've done all the hard work for you, put a lot of time, energy and effort into creating you guys a toolkit to get underway, and in particular, fast track your finance to get started on your first purchase or your second purchase. And that's with one of Australia's leading non-banks. That's Bluestone Home Loans. Go and check it out. All you need to do is go to smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, register your details, and you'll learn more about how to secure finance and invest in property. And guess what? It's one thing that is common amongst all property investors is that they all had to start somewhere, that everyone had to buy their first property at a point in time, and everyone's got their own origin stories. And in the studio with me today is someone who I think is going to give us a really good insight how he's gone about leveraging property, using property to create a pathway for wherever he wants to go with it. Nick Valois in the studio. Nick from Canberra, how you going?
Good, mate. Good. Thanks for having me on. A long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say.
How did you stumble across a Smart Property Investment Show?
I honestly can't remember. I think I've listened to almost every episode. So I'm
sorry about that.
Been listening for a long time. I'm not sure how I stumbled across it, but particularly enjoy the investor story component of it.
Yeah. Any sort of podcast, anything that really springs to mind, as in if I was going to say what's the one thing that you've learned through listening to the Smart Property Investment Show, what would it be?
Oh, geez, mate. I think that, we all come from all walks of life, and necessarily what you read about the doom and gloom and the bubbles bursting and you can only afford it if you're in the top echelons of society is definitely not true. There's a place for property investing and for a lot of Australians. Yeah.
And Nick, you said it's a pretty detailed email, and thank you, mate. I do appreciate the thought you put into it. I'd really like to share that, if you don't mind, with some of our other. We'll take some details and stuff out of it and we'll sort of run it past you. But I really wanted to drill down into some of the points that you've really raised in the note that you sent us. And And thankfully, you can see you operate in an area with quite a lot of structure and process, because it was, and from someone who, communicates for a living, it was well structured and well thought through, and you made it very easy for me to navigate and digest it. But you've given us at the end of it the 9 points you think are critical to creating wealth through property, and what you've learned from the last 7 years of property investing. And we'll get into that towards the back end of the podcast, Nick. But mate, why property? Why invest in property?
Oh, geez, that's I guess it's an easier answer than most people would think. I mean, there's lots of reasons. You've got the power of leverage. It's property is something that is much easier for people to understand. The great Australian dream, the high cost of entry and exit from it. Most normal people like myself, the share market is a pretty confusing and quite complex method of investing that at the end of the day, I don't really understand. So I never really had confidence in it. And I guess my background as a chippy and then moving into commercial construction management, I guess I know bricks and mortar. It's what I feel comfortable around. I know its intrinsic value. I know how much it costs. I know how hard it is to build it.
Yeah, and that's really good fundamentals. And to understand that and get that, for many people, it's like a light bulb moment when everything sort of comes together. But so looking at your backstory, mate. So what do you do for a living today? What's your job?
I currently work for one of the big four. So I'm a client-side project manager. So I've spent the last 2 decades in construction, the last 10 years or so working as a site manager on commercial buildings. So high-rise residential units, as well as supermarkets, shopping centres, schools, hospitals and the like, as a commercial site manager. So I made the change over to something that would afford me a bit more family life and a bit more time working from home with a new arrival in the family. So yeah, it's afforded me some great family time, as well as the ability to learn a new skill and, to spend some more time studying.
Yeah, it's a really good pathway for, I guess, technical operators. And by that, I mean tradies who come up through the ranks from their apprenticeships all the way through to more senior roles. But it must be a nice sort of transition to be able to go and leverage all those skills you've learned managing construction projects. And prior to that, you were one of the guys who was doing the building, and then you sort of move up the ranks. But now into more of a white collar job where, there's no real working from home if you're a tradie. However, you can still leverage those skills as a tradie to get other jobs, which afford you those options now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a large emphasis on getting a tertiary education, which I do think is important. I myself went back and studied and got a construction management degree, but I started with a carpentry apprenticeship. And like most trades, it's something that we're in dwindling numbers. It's a great lifestyle. It keeps you fit and active, allows you to run a small business, and allows you to make really great money. So it's a shame that it is dwindling. And I'm a big supporter of all the new schemes that come out, and supporters of the Master Builders Association, who have always been strong supporters of apprenticeship schemes.
And I guess the good news is that for those Australians, guys and girls, irrespective of gender, it is a cool pathway. So you can actually be a tradie and learn those skills and get your hands dirty and become a craftsman. But the backside of it is that you have the choice, if you want now, to push paper around and look at spreadsheets and probably occasionally wine and dine the old client and sort of have that sort of experience. It's a nice way, nice full circle, no doubt, Nick.
Yeah, definitely. There's a large emphasis at the moment on people in my sort of position with the technical background. There's a lot of people that work in this space without the technical experience. So they really call upon people like myself and others who have the on-site, in the trenches experience. And they say 10,000 hours makes you a subject matter expert. It's definitely 10,000 hours in the trenches on a large commercial building site, or even doing residential homes definitely puts you in good stead and good technical understanding.
What did you prefer, the resi or the commercial building? The
commercial side, definitely. It's a higher level of everything, basically contractually, pressure-wise. You're dealing with larger volumes of money. It's more interesting from a management perspective, managing large groups of people from your vastly diverse backgrounds. I found it really interesting, and you meet some of the hardest working professionals that you'll ever meet working in commercial construction. It's some pretty impressive people I've come across. Yeah,
well, heartbeat of the nation, our tradies, and we need to get more Australians choosing trades, because it's going to be the skills of the future, and we're really supportive of that. Do you ever see any sort of massive fist fights on site? Like, you talk about, and I've knocked around tradies long enough and seen the diversity of it all. You got some very different ways of doing things. Does it ever get sort of quite tense on site?
It definitely gets quite tense. The one thing that we are renowned for is speaking our minds and, not particularly very delicate about it. But the good thing about it is that everyone's a grown up. You usually can have it out with someone and then the next day, you're on the same page. At the end of the day, me working for a builder, if we're not making money, the subcontractor's not making money, which means they're not keeping guys employed and moving on to the next job. So it's in everyone's interest to work together. And, sometimes there's a bit of yelling and screaming and finger pointing, and sometimes I'll be in the wrong, sometimes they'll be in the wrong. But at the end of the day, we all want to earn income and go home.
And then come home safely, which is now a huge focus for our building sites and absolutely critical. We want to make sure we get our tradies home. But no doubt the skills and tact of diplomacy are probably really good skills that you've learned, which you can now deploy in your new job, sitting at home in front of a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
You may think you're sort of turncoat. You've given up. You've traded your fluoro.
Yeah. I do get a little bit of the trader commentary, but I now get to sit at home with business shirt up top and boardies down the bottom. So yeah, it's a nice change of pace for a while.
So you're a chippy, so a carpenter.
Yep.
What sort of disciplines specifically in carpentry did you focus on?
I spent most of my time doing renovations and extensions, which is arguably one of the harder things because everything you come to, nothing's plumb level or in the right spot. And you don't know what's behind a wall until you pull it down. So, and they're also most businesses will also do the odd new home in between that, and that's primarily what I spend my time doing. So, a couple of extensions and renovations each year, and maybe one new home. Yeah,
I guess fortunately for you, the skills that you can now deploy as a property investor, and this is obviously a show around property investment, not around what someone does for a living, but we get into that in a moment. But I'm told that you weren't always a carpenter, that you tried your hand at real estate at some point.
Yeah, when I first finished school, that was my very first job out of school while I was at uni. On the weekends, I was working for a company here in Canberra on the weekend. What they call a buyer's agent back then was me running the open homes. And so I wasn't doing any of the listing. I was taking the offers and passing them on. And it was actually a really great experience. I really enjoyed that, actually.
Yeah. And what do you think you most learned from that venture in real estate?
Well, I was doing a law degree at the time, which I was despising, and this was paying my way on the weekends. And I guess the best thing I learned out of it was that if I really wanted to enjoy what I was doing, to go to a trade. So I was selling a couple of new homes in a suburb near Canberra, and the developer came past, who was a builder and developer. And he said, what are you doing sitting here? Or would you like an apprenticeship? And that's sort of how it started. I thought, well, I'm really not enjoying uni at the moment, so may as well put it on the back burner for a bit and try my hand at something else. So that's how I ended up starting in carpentry. It wasn't a plan all along.
And through that carpentry journey, I know apprentices blow most of their money for their first sort of 4 years on beer and meat pies, right? Not necessarily easy to save enough money to become a property investor. So at a point in time, you must have started putting some cash away so you can start investing in property. And I want to get into that, Nick. We'll just go to a break before and stay with us, everyone. We'll get that story when we come back in a moment.
Looking for a blue chip Gold Coast investment property, or trying to relocate to the beautiful sunny Gold Coast but keep missing out on the right properties? Maybe you need an expert on the ground to source the right property for you. The Srama Group are the leading recommended buyers agency specific to the Gold Coast, providing their clients with exclusive off-market property opportunities, specific insights into market, combined with a large network of dedicated professionals to ensure you make the right decision without the hassle. Get in touch with us at thesramagroup.com.au and secure your financial freedom today.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm with Nick Valois, chatting through his journey as a property investor. So from apprentice chippy to property investor, 20 years' time, how'd you get started?
Definitely a slow journey. I guess one of the benefits of an apprenticeship over going to uni is that at least you're getting paid during it and you're not accruing the HECS debt, but the pay isn't substantial. So I had a second job. I was selling mobile phones at a phone booth in a shopping centre on Friday nights and all day Sundays, because Saturdays I had to work for the builder I was working for. And that was enough money to pay the bills and put a little bit of money away. But I can honestly say that the first 10 years once I started working, any spare money I had, I'd blow on things like, I bought a jet ski and a dirt bike and both of them probably had a personal loan attached to it. And, all the stuff that I guess I got all that stupidity out of the way early on before I had a realization that, I wasn't going to get ahead if I kept going that way. There was one moment in particular I remember. Myself and a good friend of mine stumbled across a superannuation calculator online. So you entered your age and you entered how much you earn and how much you had in super. And it basically told me that in, 2173, I could retire on, $15,000 a year or something measly. So that was a bit of a wake-up call when I was in my, early to mid-20s and realised that I wasn't going to have any sort of lifestyle that I wanted come retirement. And that was even at 65. And in my head, I wanted to retire earlier than that. So I needed to start to put one foot in front of the other towards the goal.
Well, you're very lucky, Nick, that you did that when you did it. Sometimes it takes people until their late 40s or early 50s before they actually do that calculation and say, oh, this is what my super is right now. And if I continue to do what I'm doing, and they get this realization that they're not going to have a lot of dough when they retire, or they'll just be able to live rather than enjoy living. And for many people, it comes as a rude shock when they have that realization. And then they get into this hurry mode where they either flog themselves by working too hard, or they don't deploy their capital or their cash flow in a way in which can enable them to have a more favorable retirement. Now, if you think about that, if you have that realization in your early 50s, and what's the working age now to retirement? It's like 72 or something like that. It's like maybe a bit older. You can still get a couple of property cycles done, and you can still, largely have some sort of pathway to a better retirement come sort of in your 70s. But mate, if you start doing that in your 20s, it is a huge enabler. You're very fortunate that you stumbled on that.
Oh, and the one thing you hear over and over again, in amongst everyone's different, the ways in which they say you should progress, one of the things that everyone says is that they should have started earlier. And I myself is saying exactly the same thing. They should have started earlier. There's nothing you can do about it now except for forge ahead and make as good of financial decisions as possible that are as informed as I possibly can be on them.
When did you buy your first property? How old were you?
It was 2014, bought my PPR.
Okay. All right. So like 7 years or so ago. And to give you some sense of sort of help shape, have a chat about your portfolio. How large is your portfolio now? What will be the value be?
Values are probably 2.5.
Okay.
2.5 mil with probably 1.5 debt on it.
Okay. So, $1 million worth of equity is pretty good going. How many properties in the portfolio?
There is 3 and my PPR with, it was 4 up until a couple of months ago. So recently sold one to enable moving forward. But so currently 3 and my own home.
Okay. So we'll leave your own home alone, your PPR. What sort of diversity have you got? So where was your first investment property? So where is your PPR? Is it in
I'm
ACT?
in Canberra. Yeah,
okay.
In Canberra, on the south side of Canberra. First investment property was in 2018. I was looking to buy a property in Canberra. However, I couldn't afford it with the amount of deposit and some equity I had. So I started looking further and further afield. And by the time I got a couple of small towns out, I ended up in Goulburn.
Okay.
Which was the closest, most affordable suburb. And my figuring at that point was that, the ripples of the wealth effect would work its way out eventually. And so, we purchased in Goulburn, a beautiful little cottage, 3-bedroom ensuite thing that had been renovated for $410,000.
Okay.
I had about a $90,000 deposit, which was mainly savings at that point.
And is that sort of smack bang in the middle of Goulburn, like walking distance to the high street and sort of stuff around the burbs? Yeah.
It's about 1 kilometre from High Street. It's closer up towards the private schools. So it was a lovely street, lovely little home, purchased off an owner-occupier. So the renovation they had done had been with love and care. It wasn't a flip and, do it as quickly and cheaply as possible and get rid of it. Yeah,
no doubt with an eye towards construction, you probably can spot a dodgy builder pretty quickly. And I'll ask you about that later on. But a lot of people are starting to think Goulburn might really start firing along. I know some people land banking out that way, and they're still hoping and praying on this fast rail from Sydney to Canberra happening with a stop in Goulburn. Is it start of the move yet? So you paid $410 for it. What sort of valuation would you have on it now?
So I sold that middle of this year for nearly $600,000.
Okay. So you made a few bucks on the way through.
Yeah, 2.5 years. It was about $280,000.
Why did you sell it?
A couple of reasons. One was rental yield, and it was quite low. I guess my $380 a week I was getting in rent, it was just shy of cleaning its own nose. So it was costing me a couple of $1,000s after tax a year. which is fine. But then I was finding that when I was trying to finance to buy a gain, if I was borrowing against the equity, it makes the yield even worse. And then the bank only takes into consideration 70 or 80% of it. So instead of it costs me a couple of $1,000s a year, it's $10,000 black mark against your name or against your income and borrowing capacity. So it was hampering my ability to move forward quickly. The feedback from the real estate agents was that rental yields were going to be moving a lot slower. And I figured it was going to take a while for me to catch up to where I would like it to be, so it wasn't affecting my borrowing capacity. It needed to be 20% positive so that when they only take in consideration 80% of the rent, it was still a neutral asset. So I figured if I sold the property, what that allowed me to do? It allowed me to get my deposit back. It allowed me to gain another couple of $100,000 that we then were able to upgrade my wife's car. We needed to do that because of the second child coming along, pay down the small debt we had on her previous car, as well as propel us into 2 investment properties, which is, we've completed 50% of that plan so far.
So that's really considered, Nick, and mature. And what you'll see there, what Nick's done is he's got rid of poor performing debt, as in it was hampering his ability to borrow more. And it sounds as though you weren't going to get an uplift in cash flow, so it wasn't going to help that any further moving forward. And largely, it had done its work. You've got the capital uplift on it. You can recycle and redeploy that capital in a better place, which isn't going to impact your borrowing. Yeah,
certainly.
That's good. So while we're chatting about your properties, where was the next property after Goulburn?
Moray Field, north of Brizzy, about 25, 30 minutes north of Brizzy. This is my first experience going through a buyer's agent. I was moving further away from investing in where I know, the Canberra and surrounding areas. I couldn't afford to invest in Sydney or Melbourne. So regionally had paid dividends for me in Goulburn. I figured it was a pretty safe strategy moving forward. So we went through a buyer's agent and purchased a property in Moray Field. For me, it was a bit of a land banking. It's a 1,800 square metre block, 4-bedroom ensuite house with a house right in the front corner of it. Flat level block across the road from the Aldi and down the street from the train station for $410,000 as well.
That's not bad. So are you going to subdivide, or are you going to just sit on and wait and potentially build something on it?
I'm going to sit on it for now. In hindsight, well, I guess one of the lessons I've learned is that not all experts are equal. Not all advice you receive is equal. So it's something I probably should have maybe trusted a little bit less in the glossy brochure. Not that it was a spruiker, and I should have probably spent a little bit more time on my own research. You find that when a property is presented to you, there's quite a bit of competition for it. So there's usually an emphasis on needing to move quickly. So one of the things I had learned from that experience was to drill down a bit closer with the buyer agent leading up to it on where they would be looking. So I had time to do my own research before you get, the 12 to 24 hours before, then it's either going to be put on the market, because quite often it's a pre or off market deal, or it gets put to another investor.
Yeah. And that's interesting feedback. So in hindsight, would have you still used a buyer's agent, but you would have
certainly
you would have done more due diligence yourself, and or make sure you're marching to your own timeline rather than someone others, so controlling the transaction.
Exactly. And another thing that would probably be worthwhile doing is probably getting a reference or two from not other first investors, from people who are seasoned investors, because they don't need the niceties and the small incidental phone calls and the mates. They're interested in the numbers component of it. Yeah. So they would be a lot more, that would hold a lot more weight than a reference from someone who was their first time with investing through buyer's agents firm X. And so I probably would have just done a bit more due diligence before I had made that step. It didn't work out badly by any means. Yeah. And I have used a buyer agent for every property since. So it's definitely not an indictment. It was just that particular purchase. I think I probably could have done better if I had drilled down on it and asked some more questions.
What's your concerns about that particular asset? Or where do you think it's not as good as what it could have been?
I think the money could have been for the $100,000 deposit that got put into it, of which almost all of it is borrowings, because the property was financed, plus most of the deposit was a redraw from my PPR. So I think the money could have been spent better elsewhere for the uplift that we've seen since the start of COVID. That's a bit of crystal ball stuff, but it's. Yeah, I think there's also probably some better assets that could have been purchased.
And that, again, speaks to the maturity of the way Nick's thinking around deploying your money most effectively. And a lot of people think, I'll put it there and it'll be okay in 20 years' time. But why wait 20 years when you can actually get greater utility of your money immediately? So what you're saying, Nick, is that you probably should have put that money somewhere else and you would have got a better outcome. That said, the outcome you've got isn't bad, but it could be better. And, that's someone who's been doing this a little while will start thinking that way. But to Nick's point, I highly recommend, number one, I'm very pro buyer's agent, but number two, not all buyer's agents created equal. So make sure you're getting good insights into them and how they go about doing what they do before you do commit. Next property, Nick, where was it, mate?
Next property, I did my shopping around for BAs and I met Goose and Gabby.
Okay.
And Nick at Dashdot, and we got together and we purchased a property up in far north Queensland in Townsville.
Okay. Now, I don't know much about the Townsville market, but how'd you find Goose? How's he going?
They're doing great. I had a really, really great experience. They're excellent operators. From our first meeting, I knew it was going to be the right fit.
Okay.
And Nick,
that's a really interesting point as well, because a lot of buyer's agents, a lot of them have the same technical skills, but you need to find someone who you enjoy working with. And that's different for different people. Different people are wired different ways. You might have someone who's hyper academic. You might get someone who is, hyper, personal, each their own. But you got to find someone that works for you.
Exactly. And Goose has been my sounding board the whole way through, as well as my broker and accountant for deciding whether to or not sell Goulburn and the advantages versus the disadvantages. And a lot of my success I attribute to, the people that surround me. But
okay, well, I don't want to talk up Goose too much.
We better stop. But
if you listen to this, Goose, how you going, mate? Give me a call. It's been a while. So Townsville, why did you like this asset?
So this asset was presented to me by Goose and Gabby. It was a $235,000 three-bedroom. It's a two-story walk-up Townsville-style property, and it was in need of a lot of love. It was the worst house in the best street in a great suburb, Mount Louisa. Not that I've ever been there, but from all my research, it was a really good area, some nice schools, some, good infrastructure, large infrastructure projects heading up that way as well. But the thing that particularly appealed about this property was the uplift we could do by putting a little bit of work into it.
Who managed look, you obviously know how to do a reno yourself, and you could probably do it yourself, no doubt, and at least manage tradies on site if it was within Canberra. But how'd you go about doing that up in Townsville, completely disconnected from it?
Real estate agent managed the entire process.
Really?
Yep. Scott McKinley at Harcourts. He dove right in there. He had all the contacts. We're not doing major structural stuff, but new fence, the stairs and the deck needed replacing, the painting everywhere, and he managed the whole process. And
why did he help you?
Well, I guess without a contract or anything like that, I'm basically now, if I won't leave him now. It's smart business. It's smart business. We spoke about it. I offered to pay him for some of his time, and he said, no, you're repaying me by referring people onto me, as well as, by keeping the management of your property with us.
Well, you're never going to move the management, right? Unless he really drops a ball. And now you're talking the guy up. It's the best sort of referral.
100%. Yeah. Word of mouth, the best way you can go. The property, $235,000. Once we had the building and pests, they discovered a little bit of termite damage. So we negotiated down to $220,000. I negotiated through
the termites in Townsville. No.
Yeah, well, it wasn't from my end. It wasn't. By the time I'd spent some money in Queensland, you've already put the deposit down, and spent the money on the solicitor doing the first few bits and pieces and the building and pest. So you've already spent, say $2,000 to then find out there was some pretty obvious termite damage that maybe the photographs by the agent, maybe they were taken in a way in which that wasn't particularly apparent. So I felt like that it was a little dishonest. So we did a deal with a real estate agent. My building and pest guy was allowed to go cut half a dozen holes in the walls. If I didn't go ahead with the purchase of the property, I would pay to patch it. Yep. If I did, then I got some holes in the walls. So we cut some holes in the walls, and everything was pretty good from my end.
Okay. All right. So that sounds like, what'd you drop on the reno?
$25,000. So I had a 20% deposit. We ended up going 90% LVR and using the other 10% that I would have had as a deposit in basically renovations. I think it was $25,000 in reno, but the end result was a $415 a week in rent within an hour of it going on the market.
Okay. Good result. Next property, Nick?
Next property was the sale of Goulburn. We'll slot that one in there. And then after that, I purchased our first commercial property.
Commercial, you say?
Yeah,
Whereabouts?
in Shayla Park, also north of Brizzy.
I've got no idea where Charlotte Park is. Where's it close to? Is it like north?
It's actually pretty close to Morayfield. So it's about 20 minutes north of Brizzy.
That's the whole, was it Moreton Bay Shire area, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you buy?
I bought a little commercial office. It's there's the tenant inside it is a marine logistics and technology company. So they make computers and sounders and EPIRBs and that for boats. Okay. So it suits a small trade operation, bit of a roller door at the back and, a couple hundred square meters of space. It was $402,000.
Okay. Did you use a buyer's agent for this?
I did.
Yeah. Good experience?
It was okay. Yeah, I obviously being nervous going into my first commercial property, I had done a serious amount of reading. Not that accounts for the feet on ground. So that's what I that's what I was happy to pay for, is that boots on ground knowledge.
Yeah. And commercial, was that a cash flow play for you to try and beef up the income?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's numbers wise, 158 grand was the deposit, plus you're paying a BA 10, 15 grand, and it makes me $1,000 a month. Positive. Yeah.
Okay. 12 grand a year, what do you use of that? Just chuck it into savings for another purchase?
Honestly, it's because this was purchased in a family trust. That was also a new component, just a succession planning and tax wise, it works out well. That money we're just going to park in that account, and I probably won't touch it for several years. We'll just see how the ins and outs it flows, and it's got a 3-year lease on it with 4% increases built into it. So I think we'll just sit on that money, and that's a bit of a safe fallback sort of position.
Okay, cool. And are you gearing up again for another purchase?
Yeah, I've got money in the bank. I haven't decided what the next move is. My wife's just gone into maternity leave. Assessment rate has just changed slightly. So we're going through that with our broker, and it's an awkward time of year to be putting in finance. So we're looking to purchase again inside of the family trust, which limits my options for borrowings slightly. So we'll look at maybe making a move January, February.
Okay. Well, when you get up to that, mate, let us know what you're doing. We're going to go to the break, but I've got some points here that you've raised, Nick, that I really want to get into. Stay with us. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're well, enjoying the Smart Property Investment Show as we gear up and get ready for the Christmas period. I'm with Nick Valois, chatting through his journey investing in property. Now, Nick, you've got the Nick manifesto here, 9 points, what you've learned in property investment. I'm going to read out the point. If you just give me your quick sort of synopsis or assessment of it and why you think it's important. Number 1, control your finances tightly for 3 months to improve lending cap and work out your budget for savings.
Yep. Once you apply for that loan, the bank's going to go through every bank account you have with a fine-tooth comb. So, the more on top of your finances you are and on top of your discretionary and non-discretionary spending, the better position you'll be in for borrowing.
So remove all the Uber Eats and all the other stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily about the serviceable debt, because if some of your discretionary spending is affecting how much you can borrow, you're probably at the absolute limit of, if you need to sacrifice coffees each week to be able to physically afford a property, you're probably right at the end of your serviceability. But it is a good exercise in being able to, if I tighten up on these things and I'm more conscious of how much I spend and how much I'm putting into saving, then moving forward, you'll say you only need to borrow 300 grand, but the bank will say, oh, well, there's $600,000 worth of capacity that, maybe that means that you can leverage yourself into a better asset.
Fair enough. That's good counsel. Point number 2, find an excellent broker and only ever walk into a bank branch to ask for a lower rate on the loan the broker got you, or help your nan cash a check. I'd go even further and go, never walk into a bank branch. They're a miserable place.
Yeah, mate, I had a similar experience. I remember a few weeks ago you were talking about a certain bank you spent hours on the phone to and then got hung up on several times.
Yeah.
That happened to me, several times. And then I got referred through to Tim, my broker from Multipart Finance, and I've never looked back. I've also learned a lot about broking since then, about how much of the population uses brokers versus don't. I
heard some numbers just the other week, and this is going back to events at Momentum Media. We run the Australian Broking Awards, which is a big sort of national program for mortgage brokers, brokerages and aggregators and all that whole sort of lending stuff. And when the editor of that brand, Annie Kane, got up to do her welcome speech, she said that all-time high for broker market share is 65%. So 65% of all Australians now are using a mortgage broker. It's huge. Should be 100%.
Yeah, you'd be mad not to. There's a whole bunch of legals ins and outs of where a broker is providing you financial advice and has to act in the best interest of your financial well-being, whereas the bank may not necessarily have to do that. The brokers have access to lenders that we don't have access to as a general population. There's broker-only lenders. And this was something I never knew until I started dealing with a broker. I also consider myself relatively savvy and will shop around and, speak to the customer retention department of every bank until I get the deal I want. Whereas moving over to a broker, straight away refinancing saved me a couple of grand, and it was a seamless process.
Yeah, and look, I've been pro broker for many years, and if you tuned in to the Smart Property Investor Show recently, you would have heard a podcast I did where I've only recently taken an investment inside a mortgage broker, as I believe so much, and I'll probably get in trouble from them if I didn't give them a plug while I'm getting this opportunity. If you don't have a mortgage broker and you're investing in property, you can go and speak to the guys over at Finny Mortgages. That's finny.com.au. They can help you on your way, at least point you in the right direction. If you ain't got a good broker, find one. Point number 3, an accountant can save you as much as a good broker. Hear.
Yep. No, accountants are equal parts as important as part of that team, especially when you move into more and more complex scenarios, purchasing a commercial property or in a trust. Yeah, finding an accountant that knows what they're doing, is backing what you want to achieve and helping you get there is worth his weight in gold. My team all talk to each other. It's I
was going to say, this is your A team, right? Your mortgage broker, your accountant, and your buyer's agent.
Yep.
Get your team sorted out. You'll do a lot better as a property investor. That said, you can do all this stuff yourself if you want, but it gets complicated and competitive, and you're better off with people who are working for you on your side. Point number 4, read and listen to as many people as possible. Eventually, you will begin to see a pattern from successful people and learn to see a bad idea or business/person from a long way off. Like all things in life, education is key, Nick.
Definitely. And, the more well-informed you are as a person, the less likely it is that someone's going to either try to take advantage of you or present you with a deal that, at that stage is not good or you can do better.
And this is a really important point. Point number 5 here, Nick, which is connected with point number 4, is that advice isn't free. If you're not paying for it, then it's likely you are being spooked. It's pretty strong saying you're being spooked, but you've got to question. If someone says to you, I'll give you free advice, but I'm not going to charge you for it, you've got to wonder where they're getting paid and who's paying them.
Exactly. Yeah. Who's paying them? Why are they being paid that? That's exactly the question.
And a buyer's agent isn't a project market. If you go and to a buyer's agent, go, hey, look, I've got these 50 properties in this new development. You should buy one. They're not a buyer's agent. Let's be clear on that. Anyway, outside the scope of this particular chat, point number 6, Nick, ask plenty of questions. There are lots of great forums online with supportive people that have real life experience. Have you got involved in the forums?
A little bit, not typically as much providing any commentary or anything like that, but it is good to see. There's been a few times where I've actually seen someone post, oh, look, I just got a deal at 2.2% for an interest-only loan from ANZ over this term or whatever. And, is that a good deal? And I'm scrolling down it and I'm looking at my app thinking, shit, I'm paying 2.8. Well, I'm screenshotting that and I'm calling ANZ right now. There is benefits to it, even if you're not going to actively engage, and you can sort of see what other people are doing.
Yeah, it should be part of sort of wider situational awareness. I would just temper some caution on forums. Sometimes you get some quite vocal people who might not necessarily know all the facts. So I'm highly supportive of peer group or peer-to-peer learning. I think it's absolutely critical for all property investors to surround yourself with people who are doing what you're doing, and they have no bias or agenda other than sharing information and sharing their journey. Hence the reason why in many ways we do this particular chat, but just be careful and don't get involved in threads which are sometimes quite toxic. But you see that on all these sort of stuff online. Point number 7, when all your ducks are in a row, be confident in your decision. Using a buyer's agent or finding opportunity yourself and go for it. I completely agree. When you're ready to pull the trigger, pull the trigger. Don't sit there and perpetually question your decision making. When you're confident enough to make a decision, move with decisiveness. I completely agree on that, Nick.
It's also probably worth noting that your property in Australia is relatively forgiving. So it will take you some time to come around if you do make a poor investment decision, but it's typically not going to be the end of you financially or your ability to borrow money. So if you're going to back yourself, you've done the research, you've spoken to the right people, you've got the backing of your team, you'll probably do okay.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Point number 8, rinse and repeat. Remember that these things take time and a lot of time. Yeah, completely true. No one really gets wealthy overnight investing in property. It's a game of finance, and it's a game of patience.
Yep.
And I'd probably call it strategic patience. Sometimes it's strategic to be patient, as in do nothing. Sometimes it's strategic to go hard. So you need to be guided by your capacity to borrow, your appetite, your family circumstance, situation. You mentioned, Nick, that your wife's on maternity leave. Like, that's going to change the way in which you invest in property for a bit of time. But guess what? It's not a bad thing.
No, exactly. We're at a position now where we may purchase again towards the start of next year, or we may decide just to sit and hold and upgrade our own PPR in a year or two's time. But I'm at a point now where I'm getting close to not being able to borrow money to purchase the sort of asset that I want to purchase, or having to refinance. And I don't want to do that at the moment. I want to use cash to make any deals.
So in your job, do you have the mechanisms to make more money? Like, do you got to wait around for pay rise, or do you get incentivized?
Yeah, pay rise and incentives based on, project completions and that. But I'm dealing with projects that are circa $100 million plus. So there's several years in the making. So the bonuses aren't, thick and fast. It's, they're pretty few and far between.
Yeah, but it's good to have incentives packaged up inside of your remuneration. It's a nice carrot. And the final point here, point number 9, Nick, I have a rule. You write, as somewhat of a safeguard, every property we purchase, I ensure that I have 6 months worth of total costs for the property put into a inverted commas safe EFT style stock as a doomsday fund. This is factoring in the worst that can happen, or all eventualities. The name of the game, as we said, is strategic patience. The longer that you hold your property, if you buy well, the better off you'll be. So what you're talking about there is making sure you don't have to sell down unnecessarily, because that's when you miss out on opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of the mortgage plus some upkeep and a little bit of rates, that amount of money per property, if you're purchasing properties from the $300,000 to $500,000 bracket, is not actually a large amount of money if you calculate it. So it's like between $5,000 and $8,000 for 6 months worth of total costs. And for every purchase we make, I'll put that amount into shares, something I don't know a lot about, but it sort of
chuck it the EFT. You can't go too wrong.
Well,
that said, you can, but it's not incumbent on you to make sure you're making the right stock picks.
It separates the money. It slightly diversifies. It also contains the money somewhere separately. It's not earning you your offset from the account, but hopefully it's doing just as well in appreciation.
Yeah, it's cool. Well, Nick, thanks for your time today, mate. I know you wrote to me, I've got to have a look at Canberra, and you're absolutely right. We'll get someone on to have a bit of a yarn with us on the Canberra market. I know Canberra pretty well, but less so from an investing in property. But I know it's been bubbling along there. Often it's not one of the sort of glamour cities that everyone talk about in property, but it's a solid performer, and it has been over time. There's still a lot of new builds and dwellings getting put out there, and which is a bit of a question mark. But will you invest back in Canberra if you had the cash to do so?
I probably would. The hard thing is Canberra's land tax threshold is 0. So you're paying land tax right from the get-go. Our yields are relatively good on account of that. But stamp duty and the land tax threshold straight away do make it quite an expensive proposition. There are other states that afford me slightly better yield at this stage. But in the future, I would like to. Cool.
All right, Nick, that's pretty comprehensive, mate. Thanks for your time. That's Nick Valois, property investor. We'll get him back on when he buys his next property. We'll see you then, Nick.
Good on you, Phil. Thanks for the chat, mate.
Nice one. Thanks for joining us today. That's go and check it out. There's lots of stories like that at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, social media, Smart Property HQ. And I know Nick's going to do this immediately as soon as we finish this call, is if you can keep those reviews coming on whatever podcast platform you listen to, most of you on the Apple one. I get to do the good bit of this job, and that's chat to people, but there's a really capable team here behind the scene to do all the heavy lifting with this particular show, and they get a real kick out of those reviews coming through. We'll see you again next time. Till then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Looking to secure finance to maximise your returns on your investment property? Finny can help. With access to over 70 lenders, Finny can find the right finance for your unique situation. So whether you're ready to refinance for a better rate, improve your cash flow, release equity to grow your portfolio, or are looking to find the right finance for your next purchase, we're here to help. Visit finny.com.au today to learn more.